Today, we're going to unpack an absolutely incredible story. It's a story of survival, of struggle, and ultimately of success. We're talking about the Irish diaspora, how millions of people left their small island home and ended up creating communities all across the globe. First, I just want you to look at this number, 70 million. That's how many people around the world today claim some Irish ancestry. Now, to put that, and that leads us to the big question for today's explainer. How on earth did this happen? How did the story of one small nation unfold so far beyond its own shores? Well, let's dive in and find out. To really get it, we have to go back to the very beginning. We need to understand the powerful, sometimes desperate reasons that pushed millions of people to leave their homes in the first place. The main trigger was a catastrophe we now call the Great Famine. It started in 1845, and its devastating effects lasted for years. This wasn't just a tough time, it was the single most significant turning point in modern Irish history. It forced people into an impossible choice: stay and almost certainly starve, or leave behind everything and everyone you've ever known. So, what actually caused this famine? Well, it was a plant disease called potato blight. Think of it like a fast-spreading fungus that basically turned the potato crops into this black, gooey, useless mush. Now, for millions of poor families in Ireland, the potato wasn't just a food source, it was the food source. When it disappeared, everything fell apart. And the human cost was just staggering. It's estimated that around 1 million people died. They died from starvation and from all the diseases that prey on weakened bodies. An entire generation was just wiped out. It's no wonder people were desperate to escape. But here's something that's really important to understand. Even before the famine, life in 19th century Ireland was incredibly hard. We're talking about widespread poverty, families crammed into tiny cottages made of mud and stone, and the constant fear of being kicked out by your landlord. Jobs were scarce, taxes were high, saving any money was basically impossible. The famine was really the final, devastating blow. So millions made that heartbreaking decision to leave, but their journey was just getting started. The next chapter was a terrifying voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, a trip filled with hope for a new beginning, but also a very, very real fear of just not making it. Just try to imagine this. You're on a rickety wooden ship, tossed around by ocean waves for 6 to 8 weeks. That's how long the crossing usually took. It was an unbelievably long and exhausting trip, especially when you consider the conditions people were packed into. In fact, the ships they traveled on earned a truly grim nickname: coffin ships. And it's a horrible name, but it reflects a horrible reality. See, these weren't passenger ships. They were cargo ships, never designed for people. They were overcrowded, filthy, and so many passengers died from disease and malnutrition that the name tragically just stuck. Let's paint a quick picture of what it was actually like. You'd be crammed into the lower decks, in the dark, with almost no fresh air. Sickness, especially fever, spread like wildfire. The water they gave you was often contaminated. And get this, you had to bring your own food, usually just some oatmeal, to last you for the entire multi-week journey. Now, for those who were lucky enough to survive the crossing, the journey still wasn't over. They arrived in a new world, but now they faced a whole new set of challenges, from intimidating health inspections to finding work in a place that really wasn't all that welcoming. The arrival process itself was a huge ordeal. First up, a health inspection. Doctors at places like Ellis Island in the US would check you for contagious diseases. If you were sick, you could be sent right back. Then came the paperwork. Officials would grill you, check your documents, make sure you had some money or family to go to. Only after you passed all of that were you finally allowed in. So you're in. Now what? You have to find a job. Irish men often ended up with the most dangerous physical labor you can imagine: building railroads, digging canals, working in factories. And for all that back-breaking, dangerous work, the pay was incredibly low. It was often barely enough to survive, let alone escape the poverty they had fled. And on top of everything else, they faced intense prejudice. It was actually common to see signs like this one in shop windows or in job ads. This phrase became a painful symbol of the discrimination the Irish faced. They were seen as outsiders and were denied opportunities just because of where they came from. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because the story of the Irish diaspora isn't just about hardship. Faced with all these challenges, they didn't just survive. They started to build strong communities and, over time, gain some real influence. Community was everything. It was their lifeline. The local Catholic churches became the center of Irish life, not just for prayer, but as places to meet, to get help, and to socialize. The church ran schools for their kids, priests often acted as community leaders, and celebrating holidays together was a way to keep their culture alive, thousands of miles from home. A huge part of this community support was sending money back home. There's a word for these payments: remittances, and they were absolutely essential. An immigrant would work a grueling job and send whatever they could spare back to Ireland to help their family pay rent, or in many cases, to buy a ticket to come join them in the New World. As their numbers grew, Irish communities started to realize something. They had power. They organized themselves into powerful voting blocs. This helped them get steady public service jobs like becoming police officers and firefighters. And over decades, they started electing their own Irish American leaders who fought for better working conditions, not just for the Irish, but for everyone. And all of this, the struggle, the community, the rise in political power, it all leads us to the final part of our story: the massive, lasting impact the Irish diaspora has had on the entire world. It's a legacy of culture, resilience, and connection. I mean, their cultural footprint is just enormous. You can hear the influence of traditional Irish music with its lively fiddles in genres like American bluegrass and country music. Irish step dancing became world famous. And of course, St. Patrick's Day went from being a religious holiday in Ireland to a massive global party celebrating all things Irish. Their famous tradition of storytelling continued through incredible literature, too. And this chart brings us right back to where we started. It really says it all. On the left, you see the population of Ireland itself, and on the right, that huge number representing the global diaspora. It really is a nation that exists far beyond its own physical borders. So we'll end with this final thought to chew on. The story of the Irish diaspora is such a powerful example of human resilience. It really makes you wonder, right? How does a culture not only survive being scattered all over the globe, but actually become stronger and more influential because of it? It's a huge question, and the answer is written in the story of those 70 million people. Thanks for joining me.